I believe I've been muted for about that as long as the show's been started. So, good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of CyberHub Podcast. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and all your favorite podcast listening platforms. Thank you all for tuning in. We had some issues this morning getting things going. A cold morning tends to do that here in Georgia. So, with that being said, we've got a packed show today. We're going to get right into it here. But before we do, join me for our ceremonial coffee cup cheers, y'all. And our show this morning kicks off with a story we started with yesterday. KyivStar, the largest mobile network operator in the Ukraine, was hit by a massive cyber attack yesterday, as we were first reported on the show. 25 million subscribers and more than 1 million home internet customers all had essentially no service. KyivStar CEO Alexander Komarov claimed that the attack was a result of the war with Russia and that the company's IT infrastructure has been partially destroyed. A system used to send air raid alerts in parts of Kiev was also impacted. KyivStar's parent company, which is a Netherlands-based VEON, confirmed that KyivStar had been a target of a widespread attack on the morning of December 12th, calling it one of the largest cyber attacks in the history of the global telecom market. Technical teams are working on eliminating the consequences of the attack and restoring communications as soon as possible. They're working with Ukrainian law enforcement agencies to determine the circumstances and consequences of this. At this time, the personal data of subscribers had not been had not been compromised to the best of their knowledge. This seems to be one of those attacks that really eviscerated their IT infrastructure. As they say, that's been partially destroyed. This sort of attack shapes the battle space and creates condition that can be exploited. This is a tedious Grook, who's a noted security researcher. He says this won't be as damaging to the military communication as Via said, but it is damaging to the people. And again, you got to understand in the battlefield, and we're going to be talking a lot about war here before we get into our Patch Tuesday recap, right? But one of the things you have to understand about this is their ability to attack and target civilian infrastructure creates this belief in the government of being able to protect them, and it's part of a psychological warfare. So taking down Telecom, which is the very thing that a lot of us take for granted, right? Which is our ability to be able to do what we do now, right? So with that being said, what you're seeing here is really, like I said, stuff translates from the cyber warfare field to actual like practitioner stuff, and we're seeing it right now. It's right in front of us. It's as clear as day. It's there. The UK government is risking catastrophic ransomware attack. The reason I bring this story up next is because, well, we just saw what's going on in the Ukraine. So imagine what would happen in the UK. The British government's failure to tackle ransomware. There's a high risk that the country faces a catastrophic ransomware attack at any moment. This is an unprecedentedly critical parliamentary report published Tuesday by the Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy in the UK. In particular, the report singles out former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who it described as having shown no interest in the topic. How many of you resonate with no interest on the topic? How many security practitioners try to talk to the business about security only to have them go, well, what are the chances? Or no one would really do it. By the way, it's that kind of thinking, it's that type of mentality that's led to a lot of the unrest and a lot of the things we're seeing kind of getting to the surface now. They found that the Home Office public output on cybersecurity and ransomware had been almost non-existent. It has been dwarfed by its focus on small boats and illegal immigration, according to the report. The report calls for the Home Office to be stripped of its responsibility for ransomware and instead having it given to a cabinet office in partnership with the National Cybersecurity Center and the National Crime Agency to be overseen. Dame Margaret Beckett, the chair of the committee, said that the UK has a dubious distinction of being one of the world's most cyber-attacked nation. It's clear to the committee that the government's investment in and response are not equally world-beating. So, what are some of the answers here? Well, one, you need public-private cooperation. The government can't do this alone. Number two, you ought to start like really changing the way you do this. We ought to be looking at this differently, Graying. Like this has got to be different. We can no longer let these groups just go about and hack our organizations, hack our companies, and then 3 years later dismantle their infrastructure. That is not a response. In 3 years, they've done a lot of financial damage. And at some point, there's no more money. We're already in hyperinflation. The global economy is slowing down. You're starting to see the fractures in the economy as inflation, the amount of spending during 2020 to 2022, the amount of the way the companies change the way they operate, and the amount of automation. All of that has impact. And cyber criminals know it, and they're taking advantage of it, and they're capitalizing. And the governments are just sitting around twirling their thumbs. And this goes to this debate here with a great report by Dan Raywood, who's one of the senior editors over at Dark Reading. He's talking about the activity in the Israel-Hamas war that's going on currently in Israel that really started nearly just over 2 months ago with the evil attacks by the Hamas terrorists on October 7th. And what we're seeing is that Iran's really kind of started to play this hacktivist game. And, you know, a lot of these hacktivists that come through, we know the Russians play off the Sudanese name, right? Anonymous Sudan. And we know all these different groups. But what we're seeing is that Iran is really the chess player here. And they're moving their pieces across the board in order to not only attack Israel, but the US and the West specifically. And the West is just sitting there, just randomly. Don't tell me politics are complicated. I don't buy that excuse. It's just weak leadership. And what we're seeing now is these attacks on critical infrastructure that are so forthcoming from hacktivist groups. They're not hacktivist groups. They're trained, they're operated. We know how this is. This is an Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard unit that's out there trying to sow chaos. They're out there trying to sow discourse. They're out there trying to do what they do. And we're not doing anything about it. We're not responding. We're not sanctioning the living hell out of Iran. We're not sanctioning the people that we know stand behind it, because what do we need? This isn't the court of law. Iran is not a nation that's standing in front of a jury of its peers. Iran is a rogue terror state nation. China is a rogue dictatorial nation with global aspirations that's actually violating human rights and slavery laws in its own country, that goes against every moral fabric of any country that claims to be democratic, and yet no one does a thing about it. There comes a point where you have to say enough is enough. And are we there? What is it going to take? How many? What's it going to take? Is it going to take New York City not being able to function for 3 days for something like this to happen? Is it going to take the entire West Coast going dark? What's it going to take for our government to get off their tails and start to really do what they're supposed to do, which is defend the homeland, defend their country? Every government that's sworn in, it's sworn in to defend the nation and the people it elected, not these foreign small countries that are now just poking at you, but eventually will shoot you, and eventually you'll be weak enough to not being able to respond. The time to act is now, and we continually avoid it. Which leads to our Patch Tuesday recap. Our Patch Tuesday recap starts with Microsoft's 2023 Patch Tuesday, the last one of the year, that only fixes 34 flaws and 1 0-day. This is, I believe, the lowest Patch Tuesday of the year, 34. So to end the year, they're giving everyone a little break. 10 elevation of privilege vulnerabilities, 8 remote code execution vulnerabilities, 6 information disclosure vulnerabilities, 5 denial of service, and 5 spoofing vulnerabilities. Of the total of 34 flaws, 8 fixes does not include the 8 Microsoft Edge flaws that were fixed last week. The 0-day CVE 2023-20588 is the AMD speculative leak vulnerability, and that's a 0-day bug that's been patched as part of this as well. Altigen released their security update for 4 critical remote execution flaws in Confluence, Jira, and Bitbucket. Apple's got a new update out. SAP has released its 2023 patch day. Sierra Wireless has released their security advisory for the 21 flaws impacting their OT and IoT routers. So there's that, and VMware fixed a critical authentication bypass in the Cloud Director as well. And you can see all of this in the show notes. So go check those out after the fact. Chrome 120 security update addresses 9 different vulnerabilities, 6 reported by external researchers. They paid $50,000 to fix the 6 vulnerabilities reported by external researchers. So make sure you get your Chrome updated. There's over 1,450 pfSense cloud servers that are exposed to RCE attacks via a bug chain. These roughly 1,450 pfSense instances exposed online are vulnerable to command injection and cross-site scripting flaws that, if chained, could enable attackers to perform remote code execution on the appliance. The popular open source firewall and router software allows extensive customization and deployment flexibility. In mid-November, SonarSource researchers, with the aid of their Sonar Cloud solution, discovered 3 flaws impacting pfSense: CVEs 2023 42325, 42327, and 42326. Those now Netgate, the vendor behind pfSense, received reports of the 3 flaws on July 3rd, released the security updates on November 6th, and now it's out in the public. But Shodan is reporting that they're still seeing a bunch of these online, with a good portion of them being in Brazil, the US, Russia, France, Malaysia, Italy, and so forth. So if you are using one of these, you want to make sure to get it done. The OLVX cybercrime market is gaining popularity among attackers, and that's hard to do, by the way, because attackers don't just trust anything that pops up. A lot of times they think it's law enforcement trying to entrap them, or some sort of threat intel company setting up a market in order to gain intelligence over what data is out there. So when you see something like this actually get substantial activity, understand it's important, because their popularity here seems to be attributed to the SEO efforts from the market's admins, advertising on forums and promotions through the platform's dedicated Telegram channel, and the community's word to mouth. OLVX does not use escrow service like most markets, but instead offers deposit to direct payment system supporting Bitcoin, Monero, Ethereum, Litecoin, Tron, Bitcoin Cash, Binance Coin, and Perfect Money. This encourages additional spending for the users, as funds are constantly available. So browsing leads to more frequent purchases on this one. So they've actually changed their business model out there. Access to compromised legitimate websites worldwide, prices as low as $5. Active cPanel access with over 6,000 of those available, generally under $10. RDP and SSH protocols are priced under $10. Compromised SMTP accounts are running for just under $10. Webmail credentials, over 8,000 of those, just a few bucks a piece. Email addresses, compromised credentials, $100 to $200, depending on the database size, target, and country. And credentials from specific domains and services are there as well, and as well as pre-developed phishing kits with 2-factor bypass, between $150 for the feature-rich kits, or just $20 for your most generic page. Keep your team on this marketplace. Earlier last week, we reported on the credit union being down because of an attack on one of their tech providers. It's now being reported that those attacks have been taken care of, and that all of these credit unions are up and running again. So just kind of a final to the story. Took them about 10 days to get back up and running after the cyber attack. And finally, Harry Cocker has now been confirmed as the National Cyber Director, serving at the White House's Office of National Cyber Director, the ONCD. He was confirmed in a 59-40 vote. He's the second to take the role after Chris Ingalls stepped down in February, right before we published the National Cybersecurity Strategy. Cocker was the executive director of the NSA. He's held various leadership positions in the CIA. Upon his conversation, he plans to continue the good work that the ONCD has done with its partners. So we'll see, now that there's a leader in that position, we'll probably see a whole lot more coming from the office in the coming year. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap up this week. And that's it. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.